Anyway, you are one of the most high-profile, if not the most high-profile Albanian in the UK. I could say Dua Lipa, but she's Kosovo Albanian.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, but still, yeah. Okay, they also call themselves Albanians.
That's true. Okay, but there's just slightly because she has Kosovo citizenship
and Albanian
right?
citizenship.
Yeah.
Both. She has both.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she's Kosovo born.
But after Dua Lipa,
right?
You're one of the more famous ones, right? What's it like for Albanians living in the UK right now? And we talked about how hard it's been for your brother and your mum, but in the last 5 years, what's changed?
Well, I mean, there is obviously a project that has been going on for a really long time in this country of scapegoating minorities and trying to blame on various minority groups the sort of failures of neoliberalism and of globalization with all its repercussions on various categories of people. And I think Albanians are just the latest victim of that project. I don't think I don't think there's anything special about Albanians. And now they get talked a lot about, if you read the media, it'll be about the prison population of Britain and how many Albanians there are. You'll be hearing about Albanian small boats crossing and illegals and so on. But of course, the project of kind of scapegoating didn't start with Albanians, and it's not going to end with Albanians. I lived in Italy in the 90s, and it was just the same. So somehow, unfortunately, I have this kind of tragic thing where whichever country I move, suddenly there is a kind of wave of anti-Albanian sentiment. In Italy, it was just as horrible in the 90s. There were these waves of emigration from Albania to Italy. And I remember this very well because I had a friend who was a journalist, and she said she'd call the police to report a crime. And so she'd find out from the police that there was a crime, and they didn't immediately say who the crime was committed or who the suspect was. And she said she always had to ask them because her newsroom was not interested if it was not an Albanian. So she was the intermediary between the sort of newsroom and the police station. And so then she called her editor and said there was a crime, and if it wasn't an Albanian, they wouldn't write about it. And this story stayed with me. This was a university student who have then gone into journalism. And I think it's the same, when you read now the sort of mainstream or I don't want to name newspapers, but basically there is a narrative about Albanians and how they want to come and stay and how they're all involved in the drug gangs and and of course, Albanians, there's 140,000 Albanians in the UK. Of course, they're not 140,000 drug smugglers. As I said earlier, it's impossible for an Albanian young man to get a visa. So the most obvious answer to when I get asked, why do Albanians cross the border illegally? I'm like, well, you give them a visa and then they won't cross illegally. They'll cross legally. If they cross illegally, it's because they have family in the UK and they want to join and they've been told there's a job, there is shortage of skills in this country in a number of sectors, including the construction sector, where there's a lot of Albanian businesses and stuff. So there is a very a diaspora that is, and a community of Albanians that's diverse and employed in various parts of society, some academics, some doctors, some nurses, some builders, and then, of course, also some drug smugglers. But the narrative is very much one of demonizing the community. But as I say, I don't think there's anything specific about Albanians. It just so happens that this is the easiest target for now. And if it were not Albanians, it would be someone else. And because this is just how mainstream right-wing scapegoating works. And this is how it worked in the 1920s and 30s as well. Back then it was the Jews and the Albanians and the Armenians.